Hello and welcome to GameSack. Yes, it's the episode that a lot of you have been waiting for, the Super Nintendo.
That's right, I've been waiting for this one too, and you know what? It's just begun and I already know this is going to be our best episode ever.
The best ever.
Ever. From past, all the ones in the future.
We'll see.
Yeah, anyways, but let's start out with the usual. Joe will give us an overview of the system, and you can soak in its greatness.
The Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Released in November of 1990 in Japan as the Super Famicom, Nintendo charged into the 16-bit era in full force. The system's look was then redesigned for silly Americans to be more boxy and less attractive. Early versions of the console had a cartridge lock mechanism. Nintendo later redesigned the cartridge shells themselves so anyone could rip out a cartridge with the power on, no matter if the system had a cartridge lock or not. Thank you, Nintendo. The system's controller was the first to feature 4 face buttons in a diamond configuration, which would influence controllers forever. It also featured 2 shoulder buttons, which again would become a common feature everywhere. The system runs on a Ricoh 5A22 CPU running at a blazing 3.58 MHz. It also features powerful custom graphics hardware and a sound chip designed by PlayStation designer Ken Kutaragi. The console was eventually remodeled into a cheaper form commonly known as the Super Nintendo Jr. If you want more than composite video from this, well, you can go to hell. All in all, the system sold just under 50 million units worldwide with a total of 783 officially released games.
Alright man, another great overview of the system. It's gotten me really excited for this episode.
And what is a system without games? So let's just get right on into them.
This is Biker Mice from Mars, and it's based on the awesome animated series that I've never seen or even heard of until this game came out. It's an isometric racer that plays like other games of this sort. Choose from your favorite mouse or bad guy or whomever is represented here, and off you go to the races. The racing is easy to get the hang of, but it's not an easy game. Your bike is equipped with a weapon that has a limited number of shots. These replenish each lap, but you still need to try and aim instead of just randomly blasting. You'll get hit quite a bit from your opponent's weapons, and they'll slow you down a lot. It's not uncommon to go from first or second to sixth place in just half of a lap. But don't worry, you can always catch up. As you go around corners, you can power slide with the shoulder buttons. Once you come out of the corners like this, you'll get a small speed boost which helps. You can also gain a one-time special item each lap. After completing a race, you get cash that can be spent in the shop to upgrade your bike. It's an addictive game that gets better the more you play with some good music. Give it a try, you might like it. Here's ActRaiser, published by Enix. This was released early in the system's life and brought a lot of great features to the table. What table? The table that my Super Nintendo was sitting on a long time ago. Yes, I'm a dad and that's the kind of humor I bring to the table. Just deal with it, alright? The game starts with a 2D action level, which is really fun and leaves you wanting more. But before you can go into another 2D level, you have to play God for a while. This God Sim part of the game was refreshing and really cool. It's not super complex and that's why I think I like it so much. You listen to your people's needs and you help them out. As you do this, people will build their towns and flourish. Guide your people to build their town towards the demon generators and they'll cover them up forever. But you need to keep shooting the monsters that they generate because this is where you get your magic points to do your godly things. After the land is cleaned up, a new hole will open up and it's back to playing a 2D action platformer again. You do this process all throughout the game and it's really fun and I never get sick of playing it. Oh, and I can't forget to mention the amazing music which showed people early on what the system was capable of. 3 years later, Enix published ActRaiser 2. I was sad to see the God mode gone as I really liked that part of the first game. This time around it's 100% pure action and excitement. I'm not lying, it says so right on the box. Even with the God mode gone, I was still happy that a 2D platformer was released for the system because I like those games. But my excitement quickly turned to frustration as I grappled with the game's controls. Over the years and the many times that I've tried to play this game, I'm still unable to get a solid hang of the floating mechanic that your character has. As you can see, he has wings, and instead of flying, he can glide and kind of float down. And to top it all off, the game's difficulty has been upped, and wow, is it a hard game. What are your thoughts on ActRaiser 2? Can you control the erratic flying?
Pilot Wings was the first game I actually ever saw running on the system. It was many months before the console launched in the US, but a store I went to had a Super Famicom on display. I was blown away by the visuals alone. In fact, this used to be called Dragonfly, and it was the demo Nintendo used to show the system off to magazines at the time. Well, they ended up making a full game out of it. You take a bunch of tests in various devices like a parachute, hang glider, and a light aircraft. And of course, these tests get harder and harder the further you get. You'll unlock some new rides and eventually go on an actual mission. It's pretty light in the gameplay department, but I still enjoy it for what it is. Like I said, the Mode 7 visuals blew me away at the time. Turns out this game has an extra chip in the cart called the DSP-1 to help it with the Mode 7, so the system can't actually do this game on its own. Oh, and I like the calm music here too. Makes it easier to concentrate. This is a good game to just chill out with. F-Zero is another one of the launch games from Nintendo themselves. This is a futuristic racing game, but it's not a battle racer, thank goodness. The primary draw for this one was, once again, the newfangled Mode 7 graphics. I always thought that they were grainy, but I never let that get in the way of my enjoyment for the visuals. They're still really cool. The game itself is amazing with very tight controls. The L and R shoulder buttons strafe you left and right, while the D-pad causes your hovercraft to rotate. Learning how to use the shoulder buttons and the D-pad in tandem is the key to mastering this one. And I did, and I still love it today. It's got some great music to go along with the fast action. You definitely can't write this one off as a gimmicky game. And if you do, you are missing out. Another interesting Mode 7 racing game is Super Drift Out. This is a rally racing game where you can select from several different cars. However, this one is a top-down racer. You're always racing forward and the entire screen rotates around you as you steer. I imagine this would turn off most players, but I found it pretty cool for a few minutes. The main problem here is that the tracks are very small and confined. This doesn't give you a lot of room to maneuver around, and it's really not a whole lot like real rally racing. If the playfields were bigger and less restricted, I think it'd be a lot more fun. The graphics are pretty plain aside from the rotation. However, the music is interesting. There's a normal music mode and a hard music mode. The normal mode sounds like this. The hard music actually sounds like something you might hear in a Ridge Racer game. Kinda cool hearing this come from my Super Nintendo, I guess. Personally, I'd say this game is worth between $5 or $10. And let's check out Race Driving to see how the Super Nintendo handles polygons without a Super Effects chip. Oh, this is glorious! You can choose from 3 different types of tracks to satisfy all your racing desires. Ooh, a cow! Always gotta run over the cow. Man, look at this. This is why I bought the Super Nintendo. And when you crash, it sounds like you suddenly lost control of your bowels. This is absolutely racing action at its finest. Though you could probably play a round of golf between each and every frame. Ooh, look, a cow that's not in the Genesis version. I must run over it. Gotta run over all cows. What the hell did I run into? There's nothing there. So to sum it all up, I really don't know how it could get much better than this. Well, actually I do, and that's to play pretty much any other game.
Alright, let's take a look at some of the games we've talked about a lot in previous episodes but need to be mentioned here. Let's start out with Super Castlevania 4. This game has been mentioned in more than one episode of GameSack for different reasons. As you may remember, this game was my pick for the best 16-bit game of all time. I still stand by what I said back then, and my love for this game hasn't faltered. It's the perfect mix of platforming, action, graphics, and music. Play this game, it's amazing! Dracula X was also released for the Super Nintendo. This is kind of a port of the PC Engine game Rondo of Blood. Or maybe it's a re-envisioning, as it shares a lot of level details, character and enemy sprites, and even music. It even retains the idea of taking you to another level if you mess up a jump, for example. This was one of my favorite things about Rondo. This is definitely not as good as the PC Engine version, but it stands on its own as a solid entry for the Super Nintendo. Here's the Donkey Kong Country series for the system. Yes, we had almost a full episode dedicated to the series titled Donkey Kong Country and Valis. Donkey Kong Country is a great platformer starring Donkey and Diddy Kong, all set in a nice Silicon graphics world. The game was really entertaining, and each of the characters had his strengths and weaknesses which helped throughout the game. It also had a lot of helper animals which were really fun to ride. With great controls and good music, this was a great start to the series. Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Conquest really upped the fun factor from the first game. Donkey Kong is kidnapped, and now it's up to Diddy and Dixie to rescue him. Dixie has this great helicopter move that she can do with her hair that lets you float down to the ground easily while covering a lot of distance. It added a bunch of new helper animals to ride, and I particularly liked the spider as he could shoot a web at enemies and also make platforms. The game had great level design, and the best soundtrack to the series was some really great songs from David Wise. Not David White, David Wise. The third game in the series is Dixie's Double Dong Trouble, and I feel it kind of declined in the fun factor. Sure, you still had Dixie and her awesome hair helicopter move, but you got stuck with Kiddy Kong as a partner who's pretty lackluster as far as sidekicks go. The game is basically more of the same, and instead of riding helper animals, you turn into them. This stupid elephant who's afraid of rats is pretty annoying. While still a solid platformer with better than average music, it's easily the least fun in the series to play. Here's Nosferatu by Seta. It's a fun cinematic platformer that is difficult to get the hang of, but oh so much fun when you do get it under control. You're Kyle, who's out to get his girlfriend back from the local vampire. Kyle doesn't have any weapons and uses only his fists and his feet to defeat his enemies. As you make your way along and kill your foes, some of them will drop crystals. Once you collect certain amounts of these, you unlock new moves for Kyle to use while fighting. Careful though, as you get hit, you'll lose these crystals and you can't recover them. The platforming can be really tricky at times, and the levels are fairly big. There's treasure chests laying around that have items in them. Stuff like an hourglass to give you more time, and different colored crystals for life and fighting experience. Be sure to look into treasure chests more than once, as they usually hold multiple items. Graphically, the game is great and really sets an eerie mood. The music, while not amazing, adds to the atmosphere. This is a pretty fun game if you can find it.
All right, Super Nintendo, you liking it? You liking it?
No, I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Okay, let's get back into more games. The Super Nintendo had lots of great RPGs. And while I can't possibly spend hundreds of hours playing each of them for this episode, some of them should definitely be mentioned. Like Final Fantasy II, which is actually Final Fantasy IV in Japan. You start out playing as Cecil, who gets into a lover's quarrel with the king. You're demoted and now you're just trying to win back his love. Of course, the plot actually ends up being a lot more than that. Everything works very smoothly here and you'll have no trouble figuring things out. The graphics are sharp, if not a bit simplistic, and the music is outstanding. Definitely recommended. There's also Final Fantasy V, which was only released in Japan. A huge meteor crashes to the ground and you find some of your party members scattered among the debris. The gameplay and battle system will be familiar to any Final Fantasy fan. However, it didn't get released outside of Japan because Square felt that it would be too difficult a game for us English-speaking people. but these days you can find fan-translated ROMs and repro copies of the game. Final Fantasy III did get a release outside of Japan where it was known as Part 6. A new story and new characters round out a very familiar playing game. Only they put a ton of effort into this one. The graphics are all much better, and it goes without saying that the music is outstanding. This is, personally, my favorite Final Fantasy game. Breath of Fire 2 is from Capcom, and they're not usually the first company you think of when it comes to RPGs. You start out as a young child. You find your sister who wandered off, and your father saves you both. You take a nap, and what follows is a dream. Or is it? You go back to town, and nobody knows who you are or who your father is. Well, you better get used to it because you're stuck here. 10 years later, you're still here trying to find answers, and you found absolutely none so far. Everything is pretty typical in this game, but it does most things fairly well. There's a cool day and night cycle. The graphics are nice, but of course the music can't even hope to compete with the Square games. My biggest complaint is that the random battles happen way too often early in the game, and it takes a while to earn enough money to buy things. You'll be grinding from the get-go. Still fun though if you give it a chance. Secret of Mana is another highly regarded Squaresoft game. This one's an action RPG instead of turn-based. A lot of people are really big fans of this game. I, however, am not one of those people. I can appreciate what the game is, and I don't think it's bad. I was just never able to keep my interest in it any time I played it. It never grabbed me. However, you do get to mow the lawn with your sword like in Zelda, so it can't be that bad. I mean, that's the main reason people like Zelda, right? I'm just kidding, calm down. The graphics are excellent, and once again, so is the music. You can collect up to 3 characters to help you out as you battle through the land. Your attacks depend on the percentage meter at the bottom of the screen. The higher the percentage, the stronger your attack. Kind of works like the legendary axe or Astyanax, but with numbers instead of a bar. Anyway, don't let my apathy towards this game steer you away. And of course, Chrono Trigger is another really popular RPG, and rightfully so. This was a new IP at the time, so the developers could do anything they wanted with it. The time travel mechanic is really cool, and there's lots of different party members to find both from the past and in the future. No random battles here, you can see your enemies and often even avoid them. There's tons of different endings to see if you're a stickler for such things, and back then this really gave you a lot for your money. Can't forget to mention the absolutely amazing soundtrack by Yasunori Matsuda in his video game music debut. This one really makes you want to keep on playing like only a really good RPG can.
Now here's a look at some games that are staples in a lot of people's collections. If they're not in your collection, then what the hell, why not? Let's start with some of the Kirby games. First up is Kirby Superstar, which is 8 games in one according to the label. 5 of these are awesome side-scrolling platformers. Each one has a different storyline, but they all play very much the same. It's the usual gameplay with Kirby. Suck in certain enemies to gain their powers and use them against everyone. I really like these games because there's quite a few different abilities that Kirby can use. The other 3 games are basic games like a race against King DDD and another one to see how quick your reflexes are by responding to an on-screen command. Next is Kirby's Dream Land 3. This late release is obviously the 3rd installment of the series. It goes for a watercolor effect with the graphics, and I don't hate it, but I don't necessarily love it either. I feel the same way about the helper animals in this game. Sometimes they're fun to use and others are just annoying. Still, it's a great game and has that amazing music that the series is known for. Definitely the happiest music I've ever heard. Finally, here's Kirby's Dream Course. Now this one might not be in everyone's collection, but it should be. It's kind of like Putt-Putt with Kirby as the ball, and he gains his abilities by running into stationary enemies. These might help you get a hole-in-one, who knows? It's highly addictive trying to get the lowest score for all courses. I used to be really good at this game, but as I play it now I feel very rusty. Still, it's really fun and challenging and you should give it a try. The Mario series is a staple, and it's also being covered by everybody and their mom. But being an episode about the Super Nintendo, we need to at least briefly mention them. Super Mario World is the flagship game for the system. It's worthy of that title as it's incredibly fun and in my opinion the best Mario game up through the 16-bit generation. It has that solid action that we knew from previous games and has a lot more thrown in to make it even better. Like a huge quest with lots of secrets for you to figure out. Yoshi made his first appearance here, and riding on his back added a new dimension to the gameplay. I always loved how Mario punched him in the back of the head to make his tongue come out. Man, Mario's brutal. Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island was the next game in the series, and it uses the Super FX2 chip for graphical enhancements. Everything changed with this one, and I was happy because it felt like a whole new experience. As you know, you take control of Yoshi trying to bring baby Mario back to the storks to be delivered to his parents. If Yoshi takes a hit, baby Mario falls off his back and starts crying. He won't stop until Yoshi touches him again, and this made for some frantic gameplay. More than a few people didn't like this as Mario's cry is horribly annoying. I find it annoying too, but I still think the game is insanely fun. I'm a huge fan of the graphic style and the level design. Yoshi is up for the challenge, and throwing eggs at your enemies and just about everything is a fun play mechanic. Plus, it has a great new soundtrack that is very unlike other Mario music. Next is Super Mario All-Stars. This is a 16-bit makeover of the first 3 Mario Bros. Titles and the Japanese-only Super Mario Bros. 2. I was truly happy to see how well these games turned out in 16 bits, and it made me want to play through them again. And here's Super Mario RPG Legend of the 7 Stars. Nintendo collaborated with Square to make this RPG, and it turned out fantastic. I love tramping through the Mushroom Kingdom and beyond, fighting Goombas, Piranha Plants, and all sorts of new enemies in a turn-based battle style. It's not a difficult game, and just like Nintendo has always been, it's easily accessible to everybody. The only problem that I had playing this game was with the isometric view. I missed quite a few jumps and I was bewildered at times. That's my only real complaint about this game, but I dealt with it and didn't let it ruin a great experience.
Contra 3 from Konami is one of the greatest run-and-gun games of all time. The city has been destroyed and now it's up to you to destroy the aliens. Or you and a friend in 2-player mode, if you have friends, which I don't. It's your typical Contra action with lots of great weapons. The only weapon I really don't care much for is the laser. But the good news is that you can dual-wield weapons and switch between them at any time. Despite some pretty intense slowdown here and there, the action usually keeps a brisk pace. There's also the overhead stages, which most people hate, but honestly, I kind of enjoy them. Must be that fancy Mode 7. I haven't played this for a while, so I'm kind of sucking at it now, but I did beat it back in the day. Stick with it and you'll get to the end in no time. Some really nice graphics and music round things out. Pick this one up. Plok is an interesting game hardly anyone ever mentions. You play as whatever he is, and he's trying to get his stolen flag back. But each time he sees it, he's duped by another flag and is moved to another location. I'm pretty sure we can all relate to having our flag stolen. Plok throws both of his hands and both of his feet as punches. He can also duck and jump. Go Plok! Sometimes he can find a special power which will last quite a while, which is really cool. You collect these shells, yes they are shells, for bonus Ploks. You know how close you are to an extra guy by how full the little Plok icon here is. Once you get past the first group of levels, you'll fight the bosses and get your flag back. Yay! But then Plok gets home and discovers that the fleas have changed all of the flags on his island to their flags. Oh, will the flag troubles never end? Well hey, at least we're not saving the world like we are in most other games. So, points for doing something different. The first levels are over pretty quickly, but some of the levels after that can get pretty complex. Like this one where you need to hatch all the eggs and kill the babies before the flag will return. There's also triggers in certain spots to alter the level so you can progress further. The graphics aren't bad at all and are pretty colorful. It feels like I'm playing in a cartoon world or something. Well, I guess I am. And of course, the music by Tim Follin is outstanding. It sounds like it could be a PlayStation game or something and not a Super Nintendo cartridge. He did an excellent job on the large majority of the tracks here. This game is tough as balls, so be aware of that if you're interested. Still, it's worth checking out for sure. A surprisingly cool game is the Ninja Warriors from Taito. I say surprisingly because this game wasn't that great in the arcade or on the Sega CD. This version is basically like a sequel or something. It's a single-player beat-em-up like Bad Dudes. You play as a ninja robot who's out to overthrow an evil government. You can choose from 3 different characters and I like them all except for the blue ninja dude. You basically play the game walking around and beating up someone's army. There's a meter at the bottom of the screen that builds as long as you're not taking too many hits. Once it fills, you can unleash a devastating super attack. The action feels pretty responsive and it's satisfying to kill your enemies. You can even block a lot of their attacks. But sometimes it's easy to get caught in a swarm of enemies and have a hard time getting out of it. I also don't care for how long it takes to get back up after my sorry ass has been knocked down. And unlike the original game, you don't get to see the robot parts as you get damaged. You only see your robot form when you die. But other than that, it's all pretty good. The graphics have been improved, and while they're not amazing, they are definitely more interesting than the original game. Unfortunately, the music isn't anywhere near as good, but it's not bad at all.
Oh man, this episode's like a dream. I don't want it to end.
Well, it's not over yet. Let's get back into it.
Sweet. Who says the Super Nintendo doesn't have good hack and slash games? First up is Magic Sword from Capcom. This is a 2-player game in the arcade, but when it was released for the Super NES, it was single player only. This is a fun game because you have to fight your way and try to reach the 50th floor of this tower. You're not alone in your quest though. There's plenty of treasure chests along the way that hold coins, food, and keys. These keys are used to unlock prison cells that are on every floor. The prisoners of these cells become your ally and help you fight. The good thing is that they mimic your moves, so you don't have to worry about what they're doing. There's lots of different types of allies, and it'll take some time before you realize which one you like the best. No matter what, you're in for a good time and you've got some enjoyable music to go along with the action. Next up is King of Dragons, also by Capcom. This one is more akin to Dungeons & Dragons as you pick the class of character you want to be. As you progress through the game, your character will level up, making them stronger and more agile depending on who you have. You'll also get new weapons that make killing a lot easier. The thing that I found weird about this game is the inconsistent length of the levels. Some are fairly long while others are unbelievably short. The game usually has a lot of sprites on screen at once, and yes, this will translate into a bit of slowdown. It's alright though, and playing this game through the years I've gotten used to it and it really doesn't bother me. And I'm saying this because I'm a fanboy. Wait, no, I'm not a fanboy. With 16 levels and a decent soundtrack, this game will keep you happy for quite a while. Here's Knights of the Round, and I'll give you one guess as who developed this game. Yes, Capcom. As you'd guessed from the title, it revolves around the legend of King Arthur. You can choose from him, Percival, or Lancelot as your character. The game primarily plays like the others, where you hack and slash your way through each level and fight a boss at the end. But there's a few differences here to try and make the game more unique. Firstly, you have a block button this time around, and if you don't forget to use it, it can be very helpful. You can also ride a horse at certain points during the game. These are kind of clumsy to control, but you can use them to attack enemies along with your weapon. And finally, your enemies and bosses are all other soldiers and knights that are in your way in your quest to unite England. I like this as sometimes it gets dull fighting the same dragons, lizardmen, minotaurs, and other mythical creatures. Definitely a fun game, and if you have a friend with you, it's even better. Let's check out Captain Commando by, well, you guessed it, Capcom. But it's not a hack and slash this time, it's a beat 'em up that stars the titular protagonist. Along with the captain, you can pick between 3 other friend commandos for some variety. As far as beat 'em ups go, it's pretty average. You fight a lot of the same enemies over and over again on lackluster backgrounds. Even the music isn't very noteworthy. You do have a superpower that is helpful and a couple of different types of attacks. I really like the captain's running and jumping attack where he lights enemies on fire. I'm always amazed that the enemies get up after being totally engulfed in flames. There's definitely better beat 'em ups out there, but at least this adds variety to the catalog.
Gotta mention Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4 from Konami. This beat 'em up is a fairly good port from the second arcade game. Pick one of 4 turtles and off you go. And of course it's 2-player simultaneous as well. This one introduces a throwing mechanic where you toss the enemies towards the screen and a few other new moves. The game plays with no real issues in the control department. Despite being repetitive, it doesn't feel very repetitive, and that's definitely a good thing. However, I think they were scraping the bottom of the barrel with some of the bosses since all the recognizable ones were used up in the first arcade game. At least the graphics are vibrant and the sound is good. The music is actually outstanding in my opinion and really keeps you glued to the action. How could you not like this game? Axelay is a kick-axe shooter from Konami. Yes, I said kick-axe. This one alternates back and forth between overhead and side-scrolling stages. At the beginning of each stage, you can choose your armaments. A new weapon is added after you beat each stage, but I always just stick with the original 3. The game isn't exactly fast-paced, but that's okay. Instead, it offers a ton of atmosphere. For example, I really like how the space colony in stage 2 is partially destroyed. I think this shooter is probably known most for its odd scrolling distortion of the overhead stages. That's neat, I guess, but I definitely like the side view stages more. The graphics are all really well done throughout, and the music has plenty of good tracks as well. Be sure to check this one out. Space Megaforce from Compile is another great shooter. This one is strictly of the overhead variety. If you've ever played Blazing Lasers on the TurboGrafx 16, consider this one a spiritual sequel. There's even some of the original Power Strike on the Master System in here. But regardless of all that, it's still a great game in its own right. There's a ton of different power-ups to choose from. This right here is a big part of the challenge. Once you get a weapon you like, you'll have a hell of a time trying to avoid all the others as they slowly float down the screen. And there's power-ups on the screen almost constantly. The little orange eggs will help increase the power of the weapon you have, and the green eggs will step it up a level from where you were. If I had one complaint about this game, it'd be that most of the stages are a bit too long and some of the stages are way too short. Other than that, it's still pretty much all good. The visuals are, well, they're pleasant and they get the job done. The music is excellent, though it's kind of odd for a shooter. It's too calm. The sound effects sound like a muffled version of Blazing Lasers sound effects. Definitely one to have if you like shooters and stuff.
This is Legend of the Mystical Ninja by Konami. There's 2 main styles of gameplay here. The first one is set in a town. Here you go about your business killing people with your pipe in hopes that they drop money, scrolls, or lucky cat idols which make your weapon stronger. Besides this, there's shops where you can buy food and other items to help you along your journey. And of course there's plenty of houses where you get good information on things like where you need to go to progress in the game. The first time I played this game back in the day, it took me forever to realize how to get around towns. I was stumped for the longest time until I just pushed up or down where there's a break in the graphics. Duh! Once you get everything you need, you go to a side-scrolling action platformer. These of course are my favorite parts of the game. They're fun and they end with a boss fight. I really like the graphical style of the game. The character and enemy sprites look nice and have some funny animations. The music isn't half bad either and it rounds out a great game. Konami released 3 of these games in Japan, but we only got 1 of them. I wish it would have sold better, then we too possibly could have had the sequels. Harvest Moon got its start on the Super Nintendo. This farming simulation game was released in 1997, which is pretty late in the system's life. You take the role of a boy whose parents are nowhere to be found and they left their farm empty and in need of care. It's up to you to get this place organized and start growing crops and taking care of the animals. I guess this is fairly close to real farming. You need to get the ground ready for grass and crops. You do this by building fences, removing tree stumps and large rocks. Once you have a nice area, you break the ground and plant seeds. And if that's not enough, you have to water them every day. As time goes by, you can upgrade your tools to make your farming life much easier. The game has a calendar system, so you know the right season to plant certain vegetables. Since you're doing the same thing day in and day out, the game has a few festivals and whatnot that take place in town. Here you can swoon a woman and try to make her your girl, all while enjoying the festivities. I don't know what it is about this game, but there's definitely something that I like, and I have a good time playing it. And here's some game called Earthbound or something. It's a quirky RPG with a good sense of humor. There's more than a few funny scenes in the game, and I laughed a lot when I first played through it. It's your typical turn-based RPG, so there's nothing new on that side. Enemies roam freely around the world, and sometimes you can avoid them, but most of the time they're on you before you can even try to get away. The thing that I really like about this game is the setting. I like the fact that it's not set in a fantasy world of dragons, slimes, and other such creatures. I like the modern surroundings with cities and cars. I also like that the magic really isn't magic but psychic powers. If you're tired of the typical RPG, this is good and feels different. It's not rare or really even uncommon, but it is pricey.
Now let's take a quick look at the games everyone's talked about 1,000 times before, but surely can't be left out of a Super Nintendo episode. Games like Super Metroid. Samus returns in her best adventure yet. This game is extremely addictive and I've been through it many times. You explore the planet while finding new weapons and abilities. You simply cannot go wrong with this one. Or how about Star Fox, which was one of the few games that used the Super Effects chip. Play as anthropomorphic animals on their quest to save the galaxy. You fly a spaceship that controls better than you might think. If you like your video game action at around 7 frames per second, this one's for you. Super Mario Kart started an awesome racing franchise. Race and battle with up to 2 players. This one started the item-based kart racing genre. I'm not a big fan of the permanent split screen, but you get used to it. This one also uses the DSP-1 chip like Pilot Wings. Right up there with Super Metroid is Bebe's Kids. This is what the Super Nintendo is all about. Where else can you beat up multiple Bill Clintons for no reason whatsoever? You can go to hell, Final Fight! Bebe's Kids is on the system, and it frickin' rules! How about some Mega Man games like Mega Man 7? You're only allowed to select from the first 4 bosses at the beginning of the game. And as you'd expect with Mega Man, there's lots of shooty shoot action. Now I'm not the biggest Mega Man fan in the world, but this one seems okay to me. Over on the Super Famicom in Japan, they got Rockman and Forte, otherwise known as Mega Man and Bass. You play as either character in this one. Mega Man plays like Mega Man, though he seems to have a lot more animation than usual. Bass, or Forte, has a rapid-fire machine gun and he can't slide like Mega Man can. I also can't even beat the first boss with this guy. Not like I care, because I prefer Mega Man anyway. The stage select in this one is more like a Darius game with the branching paths. The graphics are typical for the series aside from the improved animation, and the music is actually really good, though very downbeat. It eventually made it out of Japan on the Game Boy Advance. Mega Man X is a new franchise for a new generation. He can scale walls and cool stuff like that. I like this one, it's pretty cool. In fact, they made 3 of these games for the system, so if you like it, you have a lot to play. Each one tries to add some new features over the other. Mega Man fans have strong opinions about each entry for sure, but the series is generally held in a very high regard. Which do you prefer, the X series or the original series, which I'm told also includes Mega Man and Bass? And last but not least, we have The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Once again, you play as Link on his quest to rescue Zelda and defeat Ganon. This is, without doubt or question, my favorite Zelda game of all time. I love the mechanic of going back and forth from the light world to the dark world. I also like how they're similar but different at the same time. The dungeons are also much more wonderfully complex compared to the original game, but they never get overwhelming. The graphics are fitting and they don't try to be more than they need to be. Same goes with the timeless music that accompanies this game. This is a must-have in any gamer's collection.
All right, there we go. You know, I love this system very much, but I want to hear what you think about it.
Well, honestly, Dave, I think it's Nintendo's best system ever. And this is coming from a Sega fanboy. You know, I really like Sega and all that stuff, but I can appreciate what the Super Nintendo is.
Yeah.
The games have aged extremely well. Like I said, it's Nintendo's best system. It blows away all their others, you know, with the NES being the strong second, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I mean, this is, to me, the pinnacle of Nintendo. They had the best first-party games. They had amazing third-party support. This is it.
Yeah. Anyway, what do you guys think of the Super Nintendo? Let us know, and in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSag. In this corner, weighing 2 pounds 8 ounces, it's the Super Nintendo! And in this corner, weighing 2 pounds 14 ounces, it's the Nintendo Wii! And the fight is on. It's a nasty one already. Oh, yes, that was bad. However, I think this fight is going to be over soon because stop motion animation is extremely laborious to do. And I was right! The Super Nintendo wins! It defeats the Nintendo Wii! The Super Nintendo is the champion! But wait a minute! The Super Famicom has come in to trash the Super Nintendo! It is sick of the Super Nintendo getting the spotlight! It doesn't like its cake pan appearance representing the Super Nintendo library! The Super Famicom feels it has the superior look! And the Super Famicom trashes the Super Nintendo! The Super Famicom is the champion!